In 2015, Moon Studios released the critically acclaimed Ori and the Blind Forest. Sporting gorgeous environments seemingly pulled straight out of a painting, Ori and the Blind Forest wowed gamers with its Metroidvania-style gameplay and challenging platforming segments. 5 years later, Moon Studios has another darling on their hands with the sequel to Blind Forest called Ori and the Will of the Wisps. As soon as the game starts, we see Ori palling around with his friends, Naru, Gumo, and Ku, the newest member of the group. After an emotional cutscene akin to the introduction to Blind Forest, the adventure begins. Wisps takes no time at all to give players a taste of the updated combat, offering a weapon in lieu of the Spirit Flame from the first game. It also introduces players to one of its first bosses, which is another new feature in the sequel. The game quickly opens up and leaves you to your own devices, allowing you to explore as much or as little as you want on your way to the next main objective. Quests are a nice addition to the sequel, giving a little bit more variety and breaking up gameplay from a typical Metroidvania game. As you progress through the story, more supporting characters give Ori quest objectives that have you backtracking to many of the parts of the map that were previously unexplored. While most of these side quests tend to be glorified fetch quests, they do reward you with plenty of upgrades that would be otherwise unobtainable. As far as upgrades go, the skill tree is more robust than before, with the inclusion of over 30 spirit shards that act as multi-stage skills and passive perks to help make Ori's adventure a bit easier. Some standouts include a perk that draws in health and spirit light orbs from across the screen, and another one that acts as a passive defense buff that causes Ori to take 30% less damage in combat. Most of the spirit shards are obtained through some thorough exploration, but a few of them are given to you through normal story progression. Speaking of combat, this is the aspect of the game that has most drastically improved. Wisps introduces actual weapons that he wields and has done away with the unreliable Spirit Flame attack with the astonishingly short range from the first game. There's a solid variety of weapons that Ori acquires on his adventure, including a sword and bow that he finds early on. Without giving away too many of the surprises, some of my favorite weapons in the game include a massive hammer and a throwable spear. Weapons come with their own upgrades too, allowing players to change their loadout to fit their preferred fighting style. Bosses are a welcome addition to Wisps because they add much needed freshness to the otherwise stale and somewhat repetitive combat from Blind Forest. Several boss encounters are spread throughout Ori's adventure, and they range in difficulty from trivial to outright rage-inducing. One of the late game bosses challenges the player to use just about every ability in their repertoire to come out victorious, but thankfully leaves the player feeling triumphant rather than exhausted when finishing the battle. Those familiar with the Soulsborne style games know exactly what that feeling is like. Fans of Blind Forest will be happy to know that the chase sequences are back in a big way. I didn't think it would be possible to top the intensity of the Ginzo tree escape from the first game, but damn was I wrong. With fresh new chases by large creatures and environmental hazards, Wisps excels at giving players a rush that breaks up some of the slow pacing that comes naturally from a play-at-your-own-pace Metroidvania game. These sequences don't happen too often, but they add some excitement along with incredible set pieces and suspenseful music. Wisps does a great job of getting players back into the action quickly, both during chase sequences and during normal exploration. Checkpoints and saves are far more forgiving this time around, as the game autosaves frequently, and players are no longer required to use energy from the same pool used for strong attacks to create manual saves. This was my biggest problem with Blind Forest, as the game wanted players to save often to account for tough combat encounters, but didn't give out enough energy to create checkpoints as much as you should. My only real gripe about this game comes from some nitpicking. In Blind Forest, one of the early game passive perks lets players cling to vertical walls by holding the right trigger button, locking them in place. In Wisps, however, that same perk has to be equipped to function, and happens automatically rather than with a button press. While this might sound better, it does get in the way of some of Wisp's more challenging platforming areas that require precise drop timing to avoid environmental hazards. Other than that minor issue, Ori and the Will of the Wisps is a significant improvement over Ori and the Blind Forest, and is a must-play for fans of platformers and Metroidvania-style games. Ori and the Will of the Wisps is a beautifully stunning adventure from beginning to end, and aside from a few minor nitpicks, it is a marked improvement over its predecessor in nearly every way. A must-have exclusive for Xbox One and PC, Ori and the Will of the Wisps will delight both veterans and newcomers to the Metroidvania genre.